Welcome to part 2 of my conversation with Natalia. This week, it's all about treatment. Welcome to Disorderland. If you guys watched the last video, and you should definitely go and watch the last video because this one's not going to make as much sense. And also, you're going to wonder why I'm an avatar right now. But I do want to move the conversation forward. So last time we were talking about the differences between those disorders, regardless of which one you have, if you do have one of those disorders, or if you are experiencing frustrations in your life from things that you feel you have very little control over, you're going to want to take the next step, which is to get help. Why don't you tell us about your own personal experience with therapy, which types of therapy maybe you've been exposed to and which ones have worked the best for you?
The first thing I want to say is that write down is a coping strategy that helped me a lot, mainly with depressing thoughts, because depressing thoughts are very difficult. When you have a depressive thought, you try to solve it in your mind. You think you are struggling with something, and not all so not all the thoughts, bad thoughts that you will have are depressive thoughts. So that's why a professional is so important. And so when you know the difference and when you identify a thought as a depressive thought, you have to write it down, because if you don't, if you want to solve it in your mind, it's a never-ending thing, because it's irrational. It's so irrational that you will never end thinking. You start like in a loop, and you go down and down and down. So depressive thought, that I had that, writing down then, and then talking about it in therapy, it was very important. It's one of the things. That pen helped me a lot, but I know not all the persons, not all the people likes that, but I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I very, very, very often recommend that people take up journaling. And I'm glad that you started with that, right? Because a lot of the people that are watching these videos or that are familiar with the work that either of us do, they might not have access to therapy, right? They might not be able to afford it. There might not be great options in their area. Maybe culturally it's very difficult for them to go out and get it. Yeah, the stigma that surrounds it can make it very difficult. So there are things that you can do outside of therapy. You know, both of us are going to strongly recommend it, but there are things that you can do on your own. One of them is journaling.
Absolutely.
Really, really, really great. I have tried it. It hasn't worked for me, but I think it works for more people than it doesn't work for. So I suggest that you start out with it because it's a very simple thing to do, right? All you need is a piece of pen. All you need is a pen and a piece of paper. My English not so good today. Also, they're going to sound very cliche, but exercise, very, very good for your mental health. Eating right, very, very good for your mental health. Meditation or mindfulness or some combination thereof. All of those things are things that you can do on your own. They don't cost any money and they're available to everybody. So that's a great starting point, which is, you know, there are things you can do just to take care of yourself that will give you a fighting chance against some of the mental anguish that you're going through. Now, if you are able to see a therapist, or if that is an option in your area for you, is there a particular therapy that you should be looking for, or are there other things that you think are important when it comes to therapy?
Yes. For example, when you mean when you are in therapy with a professional?
Yeah, there's different. You talked in our last video about psycho. No, I can't say it. Psychoanalysis. We've talked about cognitive behavioral therapy just a little bit. There's a lot of options out there. Dialectical behavioral therapy. And there's a lot of debate about which is the best or what you should do, what works, what doesn't work. What has been your experience? What has worked well for you?
Yes, psychoanalysis didn't work for me. When you go to psychoanalysis, you just talk and talk and talk in my experience, okay?
Hmm.
And talking about what makes you feel sad, and trying to investigate and trying to figure out what is underlying, which is the cause of, and that's not good for OCD. Why? Because when you have OCD, you struggle with question and answers, and if you do psychoanalysis, you make it worse. You get home and you start thinking about therapy, and you think, oh, because that and that, and there are a lot of extra questions that you will have in your mind, and that's not good for OCD. The other therapy that we have, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is a kind of therapy that will help you with a lot of tools. Therapists teach you a lot of tools that you will use to manage with your OCD. There are a lot of tools. So in my experience, it was CBT therapy. It was more useful than the other one, the previous one.
Psychoanalysis, absolutely.
Psychoanalysis, okay? Because psychoanalysis didn't help me so well. So if you have to choose a therapy, there are a lot of new therapies. You have CBT therapy is the therapy that is for OCD, okay? But you can do mindfulness, and you can do yoga, and you can do meditation. You can do a lot of things plus CBT therapy, but the therapy and medication is something that has to be in the center of your treatment. Because you will be requested to do exercise, to sleep 7 or 8 hours, to do a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Yes, but the therapy, I think, what helped me the most is CBT therapy, because of its useful tools that helps you manage your OCD.
This is really good because this is exactly why I wanted to have other people on the channel. So, as far as the different types of therapy are concerned, I personally did not have a lot of success with cognitive behavioral therapy, and I did have more success with psychoanalysis. And I think that it's really important that everybody out there knows that there's definitely not a one size fits all solution for obsessive compulsive personality disorder. I personally think it has a lot more to do with the therapist than the treatment itself, but just looking at the treatments alone, kind of isolate them and remove the therapist from the equation, there's a lot of options out there. And I think that depending on your personality type and depending on your life experiences, depending on your upbringing, there's so many factors that come into play that are going to change how effective these different types of therapies are. For me, it wasn't that CBT didn't work. It was that the CBT with the therapist that I had at the time didn't specifically work. There's a lot of good stuff in CBT. There's a lot of very, very useful tools. One of the great things about CBT is that they kind of give you the tools to go out, and then you're able to work on these things in your own time. And there's a lot of usefulness that comes out of that treatment, because almost immediately you can start working on it, 24/7. Whereas psychoanalysis, I think psychoanalysis takes a lot longer before it starts to kick in. One of the things, though, that I did want to mention is that one of the therapies available is exposure therapy. I think that it's a little bit controversial, and people with OCD sometimes will go through exposure therapy, and sometimes people with OCPD will go through exposure therapy with varying results. My opinion, and again, it's just my opinion, is that probably exposure therapy is not the best type of therapy, especially if that's the only type of therapy you're receiving. It's not the best type of therapy to treat OCPD. I think today is a good example of that. We started this video earlier today, and we went through about 4 hours of technical difficulties when we were trying to put this together. And this is a recurring theme for me. I think you can appreciate this now. If you ever watch one of my videos, know that hours and hours and hours of work went into it ahead of time because there's always things that go wrong. And unfortunately, I still get stressed out about it. No matter how many times I'm exposed to these same issues or these same problems that come up with filming my content, it's still a challenge mentally for me just because I've been
Yes.
exposed to it. I do think that there are elements of exposure therapy that are useful. I forget the
Yeah.
name of it. I wish I had it written down, but I believe it's a Japanese art form where they take items that have been damaged or broken and then they put them back together in a way that gives the object almost more significance than it had. And I remember my girlfriend actually helping me a lot with this in the beginning of our relationship, where I would have, let's say, a coffee table got a scratch on it, and I would really obsess over that, and I couldn't enjoy that piece of furniture anymore. And so
Ah,
it wasn't directly exposure therapy, but this idea that that piece of furniture now had a story to go along with it helped me to look past the flaw. Now the flaw was almost an attribute in the sense that, oh, I remember when that happened and that was a funny story. And so I do think that there are elements of exposure therapy that are useful, but I don't think in and of
yes.
itself that it's very, very effective therapy for obsessive compulsive personality disorder. But there are a lot of options out there, and each person will probably go through a few different types of therapy before they find the one that's right for them. But I do want to move on to the therapist themselves. And I will also say something controversial in that I think that there are a large number of therapists out there that are not particularly good at what they do. And I think it's important to know this. And even though it's a controversial thing to say, and it's not the nicest thing to say, many, many, many people give up on therapy because
Yes.
they had a bad therapist. And that's a very
Mhm.
unfortunate side effect of people. But yeah, I'll let you chime in here.
Yes, I don't think a therapist could be good or bad, maybe, but that the connection sometimes, maybe it's a good therapist, but you have a bad connection because you have to make a team. You have to make a teamwork. Like if you have an industry or you have to work with others, you have to make a good team with your therapist. It has to be a team. There has to be confidence, and there has to be. You have to feel relaxed, and you have to feel very good talking with your therapist, and you have to make a team, a confidence team that you have to feel very good when you are in therapy. When you feel stuck, it's not that it's a bad therapist. Once I get stuck in my therapy, and I told my therapist I get stuck, so he told me maybe we have to change the medication. So I talked with my psychiatrist, and he told me we changed the medication, and everything was okay again. So you wonder can I uh, how can I know if that is a good therapist? Not a good or bad therapist. You don't have to
Hmm.
look for a good therapist. You have to look for a good therapist for you, that you feel
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
connection, because when you work every day, you have co-workers, and with
Yeah.
some of them you have a good connection,
Right.
some others you don't have much to talk about, or you don't feel that connection. The same is with with a therapist. With some therapists, you will feel you wanna talk, and you wanna work, and they help you. And with other therapists, you may feel not inspired or connected, I think it's the same with teachers, no? Because you
Yeah,
go to a
absolutely.
class. A lot of examples, but I think
Yeah. I think your analogy of the teammate is a very, very good analogy, because it made me think of, let's say you're playing football and
yeah,
your teammate is a world-class football player. He's 100 times better than you, or she's 100 times better than you. It doesn't really matter, right? If you aren't compatible, if you don't get along with that person, if you have if you have trouble communicating effectively with that person, it doesn't matter how good they are. It doesn't really matter how good you are. If your communication styles are different or you don't get along, that's going to negatively impact the game, negatively impact the outcome. So I think that teammate analogy is a really, really good one. And the way you phrased everything is maybe a little bit nicer than the way I phrased it. But the one thing I want to make sure that I do is to take the onus off of the patient. So whether or not there are good or bad therapists is, it's not irrelevant, but I do want to make sure that people, when they go to a therapist for the first time and they have a bad experience, they don't blame themselves. And if you see 10 therapists and you don't have a good experience, that isn't your fault, but you should be paying attention to the relationship and the communication style and how much respect you have for this individual, because that's going to be a lot more important than their qualifications. And that really plays a big role with OCPD. A lot of people are looking for a therapist that has experience treating somebody with OCPD.
Yes,
or has, right, they have 5 different degrees.
Yes, it has.
Exactly. And they're looking for a specific type of treatment and all of these things. And those things are not what's important, or they're definitely not the most important thing. The most important thing is the relationship that you have with your therapist. And you're only going to be able to develop that with the connection. Exactly. If you have a good connection with this person. So when you go into their office for the first time, really pay attention to how you feel around them, because this is somebody that you're going to be telling very, very, personal things to.
But maybe the first interview you are very nervous and you don't feel that connection, but give him or her a chance, because maybe in the second interview or in the third interview, because the first interview there are a lot of you have
very tense.
You have a very high expectation, una expectativa muy grande. And there are a lot of things in the first session. It's very complicated. So in the second and the third meeting, you are more relaxed and you can connect in a most efficiently way with your therapist. I want to say that, because don't feel bad if in the first interview you don't feel the connection. I want to feel the connection. I want to feel it's
right.
It's but if you are an entirely month, you saw him or her 4 times, and you think you are not, he's not listening you, he's not understanding what you say, he doesn't, he's not, he has no empathy. A good therapist has a lot of qualities. You need to feel comfortable, and but give him time. But I think personally, a month is enough time.
Don't worry about where they went to school. Don't worry about how many degrees they have. Don't worry about what they're wearing, how their appearance is. Don't worry about any of those things. You're going to be looking to develop this communication, and you're going to need to develop this connection, because you're going to have to be able to communicate very, very personal things over the course of a long period of time. And you're not going to do that with somebody that you can't develop some level of connection with. But I know for people with OCPD, we go in with very, very high expectations.
We go, but let me tell you that in my case, I went to the therapist with zero expectation.
Yeah.
Why? Because I had a bad experience before with psychoanalysis. Yes. So when I did psychoanalysis at my 20s, I had a very bad experience. So when I went to the psychiatrist, and she gave me meds, I think, oh, that's all. And she told me, no, you have to go to a therapist. Oh, no, a therapist. No, it's so boring. I don't want to go to a therapist and talk. What did I do in the week? I don't want to go to the therapist. And my therapist knows that. That I was with zero expectations. So I went to my therapist's office, and I thought, well, I'm here because I am obliged to do that, and they told me to do that. So I think it was a good thing in my case that I had zero expectations, because therapy was wonderful and was something very amazing to me. But I have OCPD, but maybe no, not all people with OCPD will have a high expectation. If they have
Hmm.
a bad experience like me, maybe they
Right.
have a low expectation and they
Yeah.
will be surprised by her therapist. So we
Yeah.
don't know. People are very different. So we too are very different.
Exactly.
In writing and in psychoanalysis, but we are talking about the general and in our experience.
Thinking about my current therapist and what it took to get to that point, it
Yes.
was a very, very long road. It was a lot of therapists that I didn't see eye to eye with. There were high expectations, there were
Yes.
personality clashes, there were a lot of different things. And I didn't go into my latest therapist office initially with low expectations, but I did go in there much more open-minded than I'd ever gone into
Yes.
another therapist's office because of so many bad experiences and becoming extremely serious about wanting to get help. So I knew that I didn't want to keep switching therapists. I knew that I really wanted to get to the bottom of my disorder and I really wanted to start finding solutions. And so I went in there open-minded. But what was funny about my experience with my current therapist is that I was looking around trying to find somebody, and my girlfriend had a friend that had seen my therapist previously and had a bad experience. And they explained the experience and why it was bad, and they said that he was very, 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 very tough. And for me, I thought, I've never had that before. I really think that I would do well if the therapist was very, very tough on me. That was my personality, that was my desire. And so,
Yes.
even though she did not like him and she didn't recommend him, I thought, this is perfect for me. This is exactly what I need.
Yes.
And he has been absolutely amazing and the opposite of everything I've ever had before.
Yes, yes, and we can't say this, that's a rule. We have rules in OCPD, but high expectation when you go to your first meeting with your therapist, it's not a rule.
Yeah,
It's not a rule. So
right.
if you have OCPD, not always you will have a great expectation. That feeling that you have when you go to the therapist for the first time is very important, but you can't force it. You can force a feeling.
No, of
Feelings
course
are
not. Yeah.
not, you can manage a feeling. So you have to go to the therapist as you are. You have a high, middle, and low expectation. It doesn't matter. You
Mhm.
have, but you have to do what you did, Daryl. Open mind. So don't think
Yeah.
because he has. I don't like her clothes. He's a bad therapist. Because the office is not good enough. I don't like the furniture.
Mhm.
No,
Yeah.
no. Be open mind and give the chance to the therapy to conquer you. And if it's a long time and you don't feel comfortable, go. And if
Yeah.
there is a long time and you feel there is no changes, there are no changes, and you don't think you are walking forward, go.
And therapy takes time. For me, my experience with my latest therapist, and it's been the greatest experience of my life in regards to treatment. I think that it took maybe 3 or 4 months before my girlfriend noticed any changes in me. And it was about 6 months until I noticed any changes in myself. And it
Wow.
was about 12 months until I noticed any kind of significant change. By 12 months, my girlfriend noticed a lot of changes, but for me, it was a much slower process and it took a lot longer for me to really see the improvements that I was making. And now I can look back and I can see those things and it's absolutely wonderful. But everybody's going to have a different experience.
Yes.
Everybody needs something different out of therapy. So I think that it's been great. We've touched on the things that you can do for yourself. You started off with journaling, which is excellent advice. We've talked about different forms of therapy. I think the key takeaway from that is that there's no one size fits all. And what
No.
worked for me didn't work for you, and what worked for you didn't work for me. So there's a lot of different things out there, and you get to try
Yes,
different
and I
things to find the thing that works.
yes, and I think Daryl, you are exactly the opposite than me. Everything we are exactly the opposite because it took to you 12 months to notice a change, but for
Yeah,
me, in the first session, I
yeah,
noticed a change. So
right,
it's the opposite. Why
yeah,
did I feel a change in the first meeting? Because in my case, the worst thing was the worst of the feelings was feeling alone. And when I went to the therapist, I felt I was I have a company, I have someone to talk to, and sharing with somebody that was a relief for me. But in my case, because I was so distressed because I couldn't talk with anybody. And in OCD, I don't know OCPD, pure OCPD, but in OCD, you hide some symptoms, you hide everything. So you won't be able to talk to someone because you are trying to hide your symptoms. Anybody, you don't want anybody to know about your OCD. So you are alone. You are isolated in an
sure.
Iceland. So when you go to a therapist and you can talk and can start feeling that relief, it's wonderful. So I felt that in the first session, but for all the people, it's different. It's a different experience. I know.
Exactly, and I think that's why this conversation is not only enjoyable but is important because we have
Yes.
very different perspectives and very different experiences, and both of us have been able to come out the other side a lot more adjusted, a lot happier. The last thing I wanted to talk about, a couple of times you've brought up the topic of medication. Now, there are no medications that directly treat OCPD, but there are
No.
medications that will help with the anxiety and will help with depression and will help with a lot of other things. And people have a lot of different opinions when it comes to medicine in general, and then they have opinions as to whether or not people with OCPD can benefit from medications. Full disclosure is that I think that there are a lot of benefits to exploring what's available to you out there. That doesn't mean that these things will work, just the same as therapy. But I think that being open minded, it's not something that everybody's able to do. There are people that just feel very strongly about medication and not taking it for various reasons. And I'm not here to try and convince people otherwise. But for those people that are unsure, or those people who maybe their therapist has presented the idea of medication, I think that it's important that we share our experience. I don't think that we should be
Yes.
telling people what to do, but I think it's important that we share our experience. So my experience with medication has been both very, very, very bad and also very, very good, depending on the doctor and depending on the medication. It's a tricky subject because medications come with
Yes.
side effects, and sometimes the side effects can be worse than the thing that you're going through. So I think it's important to know that there's a lot of medications out there that will interact with your own body chemistry very differently. But I'm curious as to what your thoughts on medication are.
Yes, I think medication is a technology. Ears that are the medication for OCD, one of the medication for OCD, it works with serotonin. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter. It's in your brain, and people with OCD. I don't know what happens with OCPD, Daryl, but in OCD you have a lack of serotonin, and you have to take that medication to make the therapy effective, more efficient.
Right.
Why? Because when I told you I got stuck in my therapy because of medication. So if you have a low medication or a not clinical significant medication, you will be stuck in therapy. You will do exposures or you will do your work with tools, but you will not be able to go ahead or to avanzar to have a great results. So medication helps therapy and they work together, and that's what I think. And for the people who doesn't want to take meds, I want to say that meds are very important and that meds are a technology that
Mm-hmm.
my therapist told me that before 90s. There was no medication for OCD. It is very new, relative new, and therapists did struggle a lot with OCD patients because they could not help them because there was no medication for OCD. But now that there is a specific medication, if you take that medication and if you do all your therapist work and you work very hard, you will have a huge result. You will have an extraordinary result in my experience. So I want to
Right.
use technology, and meds are technology.
I think that it's very important to try to remain open-minded because you're giving yourself more paths to happiness. If you start closing doors and limiting what's available to yourself, what you're going to get out of therapy is what you put into it. And part of that, I think, is being
Yeah.
open-minded. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I think my audience is really going to appreciate this. All of the pertinent links to all of your online presences will be in the description. Again, my name is Daryl. This has been My Life in Debris, and thank you so much for joining us, Natalia.
Bye.
Another fantastic topic with another great guest. It is really nice that we're getting to do some traveling around as well with the channel during COVID, as it's been keeping me stuck in one place. I hope you guys are enjoying it as much as I am. I'll see you in the next video.